I do not want to see piddly little perjury charges, a slap on the wrist, essentially, for these people who attempted to stage a coup attempt against a duly elected president using false information that they knew was false and weaponizing the government against us, we the people. I want serious charges. I hope that this report from Paul Sperry, I hope that it's not my fear coming true, that they're just going to get a slap on the wrist and piddly little perjury charges. I also looked it up this morning, by the way. The penalty for conspiracy to commit perjury, the maximum penalty is 5 years in prison or a $250,000 fine. And the average federal sentence for conviction under that statute is like anywhere from 0, like 6 months confined to your house arrest, or like a year in prison. It's a slap on the wrist. But what do you make of this? What can these individuals be charged with?
Yeah, I would start off with not the what, but the where. I think the where is the most important thing in all of this, because if the idea, and this would be absolutely terrible, but I that's kind of my fear here. If the idea is to charge them in Washington, D.C. or across the river in Arlington, so that's the Eastern District of Virginia, you might as well just not charge them at all. In fact, I would say don't charge them, because it's just going to make it worse, because there is no way a jury in those places is going to convict these people. It's just not going to happen. And we actually have a perfect example of it, because John Durham, special counsel, stupidly brought a case against Clinton's campaign lawyer, a guy called Michael Sussman, and he brought it in D.C. And the guy was basically laughed out of court, Durham was. And the jury foreperson after the verdict came out and said that, well, we're not going to convict this kind of guy. It's just ridiculous. Why did they even bring these kinds of charges? Lying to the FBI, bring it here.
And it was like a cut and dry case too. Like there was no doubt that he lied.
Of course, we had a text message on his phone. I mean, of course he did. What he did is he was, by the way, this ties in with what we talked here a few minutes ago. He was part of the Clinton plan. He was pushing this fake intelligence into the FBI, which is exactly what one of the other emails in today's drop says that would happen. And like a couple of weeks later, he did exactly that. And he was caught red-handed, and the Washington, D.C. jury just said, haha, we're not going to convict this guy. I mean, it was just, it took an hour or whatever, and they just laughed the whole thing out of court, and that was the end of it. So now, and of course, now he can say, well, you know, I'm acquitted, should have never been charged, blah, 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 you know. And this is exactly what's going to happen if you bring charges against any of these people in D.C. And I would say the same applies to across the river, because it's just a mile or whatever, and it's the same kind of people up there in Arlington. So whatever charges there are, I think that's secondary. The first point is it cannot be in those jurisdictions. It simply cannot be.
Is there a way to avoid those jurisdictions? And if so, how?
There are many absolutely. There's many creative ways, but it just seems that Democrats are much better at using these creative ways. I mean, we all remember Douglas Mackey, the meme guy, right? He sent this meme. He had nothing to do with Manhattan or New York or anything like that. No connection at all. He lived in Florida or whatever. They charged him up there because they knew they would get a friendly jury who would convict him, which is exactly what happened. And the way they tied it in was like, well, his Twitter feed was being read in New York, hence, you know, we can charge him there. Well, all these crimes that these people committed, they affected the people in Oklahoma, in Texas, in West Virginia. I mean, take your pick, right? With Mar-a-Lago, we have a direct link to Florida, where it's more than the people there were affected. There was actual activity at Mar-a-Lago. Of course, the raid. We're talking about the August 2022 raid down there, which many people say is connected with finding all these documents which are coming out, where they feared that Trump might have his own personal copies, and they wanted to make sure that, you know, they take them away from him. I don't know if that's really true or how much of that is true, but you can definitely create angles to go to Florida or any of these other places. So that would be my, you know, overriding priority. Make sure you do it in the right jurisdiction. Otherwise, just don't do it at all. Yeah. Now, in terms of the charges, I agree with you. The perjury, or the lying to the government in some form. This is the 18 U.S.C. 1001 charge, which we've all heard so much, because that's the one they used against all these Trump associates. They used against Flynn, they used against Papadopoulos, and so on. Papadopoulos did in fact go to jail for 2 weeks, as you say. This is the sort of the average you get for that kind of charge. I guess it would be nice to kind of get them on something, anything, but I agree with you that would be disappointing if it was that. I mean, the one that probably applies the best is the conspiracy against the United States one. That's a very broad one. And what it basically entails is you are hindering the government in its normal legal function. You are somehow impeding the government from functioning. So this is very broad, but you can definitely fit it to these facts, because what these people did, like say, let's take Brennan, for instance, when he made up that fabricated intelligence to, which went against what the actual intelligence said, namely that Trump was only elected because of Putin. That ruined Trump's presidency. That came out before Trump was inaugurated. And from that day forward, all the media ever said is like, oh, he's only president because of Putin. I mean, that was a huge, huge problem for Trump throughout his first term. They never expected him to do this, immense, incredible comeback. But, that's a different story. So they ruined his first term. That is impeding the functioning of the U.S. government. So this is a very easy way of fitting it into that particular statute. So that's the one I would go for. And that one has a particular advantage as well, aside from being able to fit the facts very well. It's the fact that it's a conspiracy statute. That means that any time anyone did anything to further the conspiracy, you restart the clock. So with all these federal charges, or almost every single federal charge, there's a 5-year time limit. Not a 5-year time limit from when you first found out about the crime having happened. No, from when it actually took place. Now, most of the things we just talked about are like July 2016, December 2016, and so on. So that time limit has run. We're way beyond 5 years. Can't do anything about that. Can't bring charges. But once it's a conspiracy, the clock keeps resetting. Every time any one of these conspirators does anything to further the conspiracy, to hide the conspiracy, to conceal what they did, any kind of what they call overt act, the clock starts running again. So it's very easy to, for instance, Brennan had testimony in Congress in 2023. And in that testimony, he absolutely, definitely tried to conceal this conspiracy. So where the 5 years started again then. And so
would the New York Times op-ed even count towards that, since they're trying to cover up with this op-ed, they're trying to cover up what they did?
Yeah, I mean, you run into the problem of was it, this is kind of a private act, and by the way, they say in the first line or second line or whatever, we're just private people saying this. Yeah, I mean, you could make that argument as well, but I think we have plenty of kind of official or under oath acts specifically talking to Congress in the past 5 years that would easily extend the clock. And then the other beautiful thing about conspiracy is you don't have to reset the clock for everyone individually. As long as one of the co-conspirators, in this case Brennan, does an overt act, it applies to all these people.
Oh, interesting.
There's also something called that ties in with this, that's called Pinkerton liability, which is where if you were involved at the outset, like say in Obama, July of 2016, he knew that this was a Clinton plot, and he told his intelligence officials to go after Trump. I'm just sort of truncating, but just to simplify. We need to find out more details of what he actually said when he found out about this Clinton plot to smear Trump with Russia collusion. But that goes back to July of 2016. Let's just assume Obama never did another thing. Okay, so it's been 9 years or whatever. Well, because he was part of that original conspiracy, again, assuming that he said something to the effect of what I just said, then anything the others did in the meantime would also count for Obama. So he would be dragged into that as well, even if he had nothing to do with that. You have the famous analogy of the bank robbery where, you're just a getaway driver and you didn't even know there were guns involved and you just wanted some money. But then people get shot and other horrible things happen. Well, you're liable for all of that, even if you were just a getaway driver. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of roughly what we're talking about here in terms of pulling in people like Obama and others who may not have been, acting any overt way for the past, 8-9 years. Well, they'd still be liable given what they did to begin with.
What about the immunity thing, executive privilege or the presidential immunity? President Trump actually referenced last week, he said Obama's going to be hard to get because of the Supreme Court ruling in my favor on presidential immunity. And he, quipped that Obama has him to thank for that. Is there any way to hold former President Obama accountable for this?
It's very complex. I mean, it was the same kind of when they went after Trump. And then Trump invoked immunity. And then they were kind of splitting hairs about, well, it doesn't apply to things you ddid after you left office and this and that. It's a minefield. It's very complex. But I think Trump is playing this exactly right when he said that, what you just alluded to, that he said, well, Obama might get off because of immunity. I think, just looking at it legally, Obama would probably get off just based on facts, because at every level, at every stage, at every interaction, he always has this deniability. He can always say, well, I just did what Brennan said. I just followed what Comey said. By the way, Comey and Brennan cannot do that, because if Brennan says, oh, I just did what the intelligence professional said, well, we have proof he did the opposite. He suppressed what they said, and he did the opposite. So Brennan doesn't have that excuse. But at Obama's level, who's obviously rung higher in the hierarchy, he does have that excuse, because Obama never dealt with some, analyst at the CIA. He just dealt with Brennan. So he can always say, well, I just did what Brennan said. So he can do that for pretty much any interaction. So realistically, I don't think there's any hope of really coming after Obama. So from a narrative point of view, in terms of framing it, I think Trump is doing a really smart job by saying, well, we're not going to go after Obama because of immunity, which of course then the lingering stench is, well, Obama did do all these horrible things, but we can't go after him because of immunity. Perfect. I love it.
So in your opinion, as an attorney, I find this to be fascinating. You're actually the first person that I've heard to go over specific statutes and basically the risks or the possibilities, the chances of conviction, assuming for a moment, and I know this is a big assumption, but assuming for a moment that this is in a court that's fair, not Virginia, not DC, a court that's actually looking at the elements of the case and of the statute, what would you say the percentage chance of conviction for Comey, for Brennan, for Clapper, and for Gina Haspel, too? I mean, I want to talk about that. Maybe that's even separate. When she defies the order of the White House to release that House Intel report that she was in custody of at the CIA, is that not subversion of the President of the United States? Can she face charges? And if so, again, you can answer together or separately, what, in your professional opinion, is the percentage chance of conviction should the higher charges be brought against these individuals?
The overarching point is that with every single one of them, you always have to ask yourself, what's their excuse? And the excuse is always going to be to blame some underling, what we just talked about, that Obama can just say, well, I just did what Brennan said. And if you go through those people, the only one who doesn't have that excuse, and it's documented that we know of, is Brennan. Because we know of the document that was released last week, which is the House Intelligence Report, which again, it has the footnotes, it has the exact words, it has the extracts, it has the documentation. We can prove that Brennan defied these professionals. He defied the advice and he went the other way. There's a very interesting footnote, and I wonder whether that was put there kind of on purpose for someone now to pick up and run with. And that footnote says that there were reports that Brennan didn't want to get published. So even though the process within the CIA is that you file them somewhere and then then they're somewhere part of the record, he stopped that from happening because those reports went against his narrative. They were that Putin did not want to get Trump elected, so he didn't want those in there. So instead,
it was like 14 of them, right?
Well, that's right. But he picked out 2 or 3 that he didn't. The footnote basically says he picked out a few that he absolutely did not want on the record. Yeah. And completely unprecedented what he did there. And again, it's proven that it's documented. So there you are talking about actions on his part, which he cannot blame on some underling. The underlings actually wanted to just follow the process and put this thing in the record, and he didn't want that. So that's very, very bad for him. Overruling his professionals in terms of their assessment that Putin did not want Trump elected, said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do the opposite. That is something he cannot blame on anyone else. Now, as for Comey, I think he's kind of smarter than Brennan. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but we saw that play out, in 2017 after he was fired.
He's a wily character, is how I would describe him.
Very, very slimy, weaselly. It's just that kind of it seems to be his nature. Yeah. Anytime he said anything, there was that one time, it was during COVID, I think it was September 2020, he had been called to Congress to testify about all this stuff. Everything was, I don't recall, I don't remember, and you really alluded to this earlier. He is going to be harder to pin down. again, all of these people are looking for someone else to blame. That's always going to be the same modus operandi, which, by the way, is why it's so difficult to nail down mafia bosses, because mafia bosses always have underlings, and the underlings have underlings of underlings. And, you work your way down the chain.
It's literally the analogy that I made earlier in the week. I was calling Obama the boss and Brennan the underboss. And Gina Haspel the enforcer, because that's how this whole conspiracy was structured.
Correct. And with Haspel, Haspel is a very interesting case as well, where obviously she was right at the center of when all this started in July of 2016, because she was the CIA station chief in London, sent there by Brennan. How on earth she got to be Trump's CIA chief, anyway. And she then referred this fake tip from the Australians to about this Trump advisor called Papadopoulos, which then supposedly kicked everything off. But the whole thing was just a totally, just feeble crap. She was the one who referred it. I can't say I know that was that she was part of a plot or whatever. I don't know, but it's very notable that she was there at that time. Very, very strange. But we do know what you said here a few minutes ago, that in 2020, when all this stuff was supposed to come out, and John Ratcliffe was the DNI at the time, and she was the CIA chief, she suppressed it. She made sure it wouldn't come out. Now it's 5 years later that we have to, wait for an additional 5 years. Now, can she blame her actions? We don't know the details of her actions because all the documents haven't come out yet, but can she blame that on some underling? Can she say, oh, the underling told me we can't release this because of this and this? Or is it more like Brennan, where she personally made that decision, and the fact that happened is documented? Maybe some underling took some notes. Maybe an underling sent themselves an email at the time saying, Gina Haspel refused to release, or, whatever. Having an email from the time would be fantastic. So I think in her case, we don't know enough yet. I think you mentioned Clapper as well. So I said, Comey, Weasel, probably not going to be, he's probably just going to weasel his way out of stuff. This guy Clapper,
even for the FISA stuff. Well, hold on just a second. I want to talk about Comey for a second, because I mean, obviously he's a weasel. He's such a wily character. He pretends ignorance all the time as a way of not allowing himself to be on record saying anything culpable in any way. But what about the fact that he was aware that the Steele dossier was fake, and he used the Steele dossier as justification for the FISA court warrant against Carter Page? Can he not be held accountable for that?
Yeah, that, and as I'd say what is perhaps even worse is briefing Congress. So after he knew that the whole thing was fake, the so-called primary subsource, this guy called Igor Danchenko, the guy whom Steele used as his patsy, like, oh, I don't know. Steele said, I don't know anything. This is this Danchenko guy who told me. Well, the Danchenko guy told the FBI in January of 2017 that this is all just gossip, rumor, made up, just drunken bar talk. These are the kinds of terms he used to describe it. So at that point, the whole thing collapsed. And yet, Comey not only signed off on these FISA warrants, but in my view, even worse, he then went to Congress and just outright lied. He just said, no, this source is super reliable, and this has all been, most of it has been corroborated, and just total lies. And as we just found out from last week's drop, the one that we keep talking about, the House intelligence drop, he lied to Reince Priebus. So Comey went to the White House in February of 2017. And by the way, lying to Reince Priebus is lying within, the sphere of the U.S. government. So absolutely perjury. He
was chief of staff at the time. Reince Priebus was.
Correct. He was chief of staff. And Reince Priebus, probably a bit of a soft character, but at least I think he was trying to do the right thing, going, directionally. He was correct. So he said, hey, Comey, what's going on? What's with this Steele dossier? Why the hell is that? Why are you even talking about it? It's just garbage. It's rubbish. And then he told Reince Priebus all the same lies. No, it's been corroborated. Oh, no, the source is super duper trustworthy, and so on. All the things that he knew to be lies. Now, how is he going to wiggle his way out of it? Well, first of all, he's going to wiggle his way out of it by saying, oh, this is more than 5 years old, what we talked about earlier. Okay, can we make it a conspiracy? Maybe, because we can say, well, he was conspiring with someone else to advance these lies, and hence the clock is being reset, and so on. But I would just be... I'm just a bit pessimistic as far as he's concerned, because even with the lies to Reince Priebus, given what we know about Comey, given what the sort of operator he is, I kind of expect he has some excuse already lined up. It's like his brain works overtime figuring out how he's going to cover for himself. So yeah, no, when I told Reince Priebus, it was actually Peter Strzok. Peter Strzok told me beforehand, or just something, whatever. Blame some underling. I just assume he's always got some kind of excuse. Whereas Brennan, what we just mentioned earlier, he just did it in a more kind of clumsy way, and it's documented, and that's very bad for him.
I still think we should try to get Comey, because Comey was also he didn't just brief Congress, he also briefed the president on. Yep. I mean, it was Comey who briefed the president. I think it was January 7th of 2017. So before when President Trump was President-elect Trump, he briefed him with that fake ICA, and then he leaked it to CNN. This is when the media firestorm about Russia collusion started, because of Comey briefing Trump with that fake information.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I'm not saying he shouldn't be charged, or that I don't want that or whatever. I'm just assessing the kind of probabilities here. So out of all the people you mentioned, I think Brennan is by far in the most trouble, just because of what we know. And again, this is based on what came out last week. Now, I don't know if there might be other documents to do with Comey that are equally as bad. That would be great. We just don't know if they exist. And my prediction is that they don't exist because Comey is just
because he's smart enough to cover his tracks.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. There's not going to be rocks written on the beach that say, I did it, from James Comey. He's gonna be a little more wily than that. What about Clapper?
Yeah, Clapper is one of those that I assume is just not that smart. He seems to be more of, even though he was supposedly the nerve center because he was the director of national intelligence. So he was supposedly, by the way, that position was created after 9/11 to sort of pool all the intelligence that, we all know what the right hand knows, what the left hand does, and so on. But if you look at how this story unfolded, if you look at the documentation that came out, in particular, again, I keep talking about the House report from last week, which is so powerful. Again, that was Kash Patel and a few others, Derek Harvey and so on, who were behind that one. Really, really great work they did. If you look at the details of it, he just doesn't seem to figure very high. I just think he was just sort of this figurehead, DNI, and they would just use him to push their narratives. Yeah, James do this, James do that. But I never get the feeling that he was driving any of these hoaxes. He was kind of Brennan's appendage, even though I guess he was Brennan's boss as DNI. I don't know, but but given that he was Brennan's appendage, I would say he's probably number 2 on my list of people who are in trouble, because he did do a lot of stupid things. Like, again, he went to Congress and talked about the same stuff that he talked about in yesterday's op-ed about, no Steele dossier and this and that. And so, by parroting whatever Brennan was saying, I think he's himself in quite a lot of trouble. The distinction I would make is I don't see any evidence of him kind of driving this. It's really more of a Obama, Brennan, Comey driving it, and he was just kind of there, probably not very smart about it.